Hi, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter, your Sports Illustrated beat writer covering the Las Vegas Raiders and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. Super excited to have today my buddy, the great Matt Hladek. He covers the NFL for thespun.com. If you do not have the Spun in your favorites, I can tell you I read it every morning, but I'm very ticked off because there must have been a story after I read that published. So by the time I read the next morning, I missed it. We're going to talk about that story today. But it's going to be a lot of fun. Let's welcome in the great Matt Hladek. Matt, how are you, bud?
I'm doing well. Always a pleasure to be on with Raider Nation and talking with you guys.
Got a ton of Raider stuff today we got to get into. A ton. But I got to get to this one because it is Raiders related a lot. But I mean, we got a lot more deeper Raider stuff. You guys had an article at the Spun this week, and Travis Kelce came out and made a big admission about the Raiders and what they did to his relationship with Taylor Swift on a very significant day. You got to break this down. What are you doing?
Yeah, it's last week or a couple days ago. Travis Kelce went on the Bussin' with the Boys podcast. Barstool, which is former NFL lineman Taylor Lewan and former Raiders linebacker Will Compton. And they talked about a whole bunch of different things, but he had some really interesting things to say about the Raiders in particular. And it came up in the context of his relationship with Taylor Swift. They were talking about it, and he said, "I'm going to read the quotes." He goes, "We got our blank beat by the blanking Raiders on Christmas. Blank and ruined Christmas, mother blankers," Kelce said. Antonio Pierce, he had those dudes. They were ready to brawl out there in the field, 100%, man. And I love that blank. I was like, man, if we don't play with that kind of edge or that kind of toughness, that kind of like don't F with us mentality, we won't be stopped. And it just kind of ended up like that. But the Raiders game was definitely a turning point. So he basically said, he joked, that the Raiders ruined his first Christmas with Taylor Swift. Obviously, if everyone can remember, she was at Arrowhead. She was in the booth, and, it was a big thing. And you see those quotes, too. On one hand, reading and hearing that, it may elicit some groans from Raider fans because you never like hearing that your favorite team motivated its biggest rival to win another championship. But on the other hand, I think it gives you some encouragement and gives you something, to be proud of, because that's a tight end, a guy at the cream of the crop of his position for the best team in the league, two-time defending Super Bowl champions, giving a lot of praise to your organization and a lot of praise to your head coach, saying he had them ready. And they sent a wake-up call to the Chiefs. And I think there was a reason why that was the last game they lost all year, because I think they realized, and Travis Kelce said they realized, that they weren't doing enough to defend their championship. They weren't ready. They weren't physical. They weren't playing hard enough. So the Raiders kind of woke them up. And if the Raiders can keep that identity going in 2024 and beyond with Antonio Pierce, that's the best place to start.
I think it will also comfort the Raiders, though, that they ruined him and Taylor Swift's Christmas.
Yes.
I think they'll enjoy that.
That's
They
true.
pillaged. Remember the Raiders pillaging just for fun.
That's very true.
Ruining Christmas and other holidays. All right, here we go. So I want to stick on the Raiders here, but I really want to get into, they're going to Costa Mesa for training camp. Now, let's be very blunt. For Hondo, this is a significant pain in the rear. I'm going to be away from my family for 5 weeks. It's just going to be, 4 weeks. But I don't care because it isn't about me. It is great for the Raiders to get away, camaraderie. Again, who cares what it does for me personally? Professionally, I could care less. Yeah, I think this is a great move by the Raiders. I think it's great by Antonio Pierce. I'd like your thoughts covering the NFL macroly, what you think of this, what you like about it, and what if you think it says to you about the Raiders.
We've seen some teams do this. I think there's a few teams that are training in California this summer that don't play in California. So, and we've seen other teams go to different states for training camp. I think that it always sort of signifies that sort of bunker mentality. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's where you want your team to. It's just you. Like you're not going home after camp to your wife and kids or your family, whatever, because it's not local. It's just the personnel. It's just the team. Listen, and for the players. I know that's a grind. It's a grind because you don't get any outside distractions or any type of normalcy. It's just all football all the time. But I think that does sort of have the potential to breed a really tight unit, and it does kind of help you with the mental toughness to fight through adversity and kind of be ready for the season. So listen, I think Antonio Pierce, in his mind, he's hoping he's going to be the coach of the Raiders for a long time. So I think this is a good way for him to start off his first full season, first training camp, and I think he sees how it works and he can adjust over time. In the future, does he want to keep going away for camp? Does he want to hold it more locally? In Henderson,
Mm-hmm.
it's plenty of time to decide all those things. But I think for now, this is a really good move on paper, at least, to kind of try to build up that team unity and build up, that base for September.
I'm going to share with you another thing that I think is being not looked at properly with this. When the Raiders were in Oakland, they were a team that was financially strapped. Mark Davis did a phenomenal job doing something his dad could never do. He got the Raiders moved without a lawsuit, gets them in Vegas, where now the team is flush with cash, absolutely flush with cash. And you got an owner now that says, listen, it is significantly cheaper to have training camp in Henderson. They got to move all the people, all the equipment, all the cooks, hotels, all of it. When right there in Henderson, they don't have to do anything. I think it's a humongous statement also about Mark Davis.
That's something that I didn't even think about. So I'm glad you pointed that out. From you're somebody who's on the ground and really is covering the team day to day. I think it does speak to commitment on his end. Where listen, we're not going to spare any expense. We're not going to spare any. If our head coach, wants to do this, we're going to say yes. We're going to give him the opportunity. We're going to give everyone the resources they need because, like you said, it's not just players and coaches. It's training staff, it's nutritional staff, it's all these background things where you have to now house them and pay for their transportation and make sure that they're taken care of for a month. So it's a big undertaking, without a doubt. It's a huge undertaking. So I think the fact that Mark Davis is willing to do it, like you said, speaks well to the financial solvency of the Raiders, and also speaks to his commitment to give his coaching staff what it needs or what it wants to try to build a team.
All right, now I'm hearing this, from NFL type
Mm-hmm.
people, but the Raiders are there's still no clarity yet on who's going to get to go to training camp because it's not their market. They can't just open it to everybody. And there's a strong belief that season ticket holders can go, but it's just going to be unique. To me, this is dumb. If the NFL is going to tap the brakes on this, and that to me makes no sense. Raiders aren't talking about it, so we don't know where they stand on it. Um, but if the NFL, if the Detroit Lions want to go to Henderson to hold training camp, who cares if they open it up to the public? If the NFL, which talks about parity, if they really believe that, then if their teams are all over the country, who cares? Because it's just building the NFL brand. If that's true, that the NFL would be the ones that saying, nope, it's somebody else's market. To me, that is a stupid move by the NFL. I'd love your thoughts and perspective on it because I'm telling you, every time the Raiders play in California, it's a Raider home game. It's just the
Well,
reality of the situation.
mhm.
It is what it is. I'd love your
And,
thoughts.
and well, I was going to say too, with a fan base like the Raiders, that's national. Same thing with the Cowboys. The Cowboys have had training camp for a while now. I think in Oxnard, California. So that's obviously a national fan base. When you have those type of fans where they're going to be all over the country, I think it makes sense to kind of open it to the public because those fans are there to begin with, or they're within driving distance, travel distance to be there. Um, like you said, the example you gave, if the Lions came to Henderson, Nevada, probably wouldn't be a ton of Lions fans in the Vegas area. I'm sure there's some, but there's not a lot as opposed to them training locally in Michigan. Um, I had not even thought about that in terms of traveling. I think that I understand there's sensitivities with markets and things like that, but I think the reality situation is when there's certain fan bases, they have fans all over the country. I mean, if the Raiders were going to come into New Jersey and try training camp, I could tell you a few Raider fans I know personally that would probably be there for the open practices. So I think it would be wise to just let them, let them open it up the way they normally would.
I'll tell you, sometimes the NFL just shoots themselves in the foot, and I don't get it. They overthink things. All right, I want to get to a very massive story that came out this week, and it did not get a lot of attention, which blew my mind. Came out last week, excuse me. The NFL does not lose very often. And the NFL, talking about the brand, and they
Mm-hmm.
lose their NFL Sunday ticket lawsuit, which is going to cost them billions, not a billion, billions. And I don't know the exact number. I was told it's going to be somewhere around 500 million per team when you split it up over 32. But what a colossal mistake by the NFL, the way they handled the Sunday ticket, losing this lawsuit. Break this down for fans, if you would, because bars and individuals and everybody sued. And I would love to hear your breakdown of this.
Yeah, it was the U.S. District Court in California ordered the NFL to pay 4.7 billion with a B to fans and bars who felt they were charged an inflated price to watch the out of market games. The current package for Sunday tickets $349 a year, so $350 a year. During the trial, apparently it was revealed that an offer of 70 per year was on the table, and the NFL turned that down. Um, the NFL believes because it's a premium product that it shouldn't be priced down at a much cheaper number because I guess it's the NFL. We are the brand, and these people are trying to see games out of market. Um, but this I think was the funniest part of it. The lawsuit was actually filed 9 years ago by the Mucky Duck, a sports bar in San Francisco. I think that's a great name for a bar. And they claim the league violated antitrust law by putting all the out of market games into a single price and not offering single team packages. And now it's come to fruition. And the jury said they did, and now they owe a ton of money, which is now listen, the NFL is going to appeal. We know how long court proceedings can drag out, so it's not over yet. But I thought it was a big deal because like you said, the NFL doesn't lose often. The NFL settles sometimes. We've seen the NFL settle with Colin Kaepernick. We saw the NFL settle with John Gruden. The NFL will settle when it's in its best interest, but it doesn't lose often. And this time it did.
So if it's a 4 point something billion, then the 500 million I was told is way off. It's probably more of a quarter of a billion, but still, hey, what's a quarter of a billion
Yeah,
among billionaires, right?
yeah. I mean, I could do a lot with a quarter of a billion. If someone says, "Hey, we can only give you a quarter of a billion, not a half a billion," I'm not really going to be crying in my coffee.
All right. I want to get to an interesting story. We wrote about it. Chris Jones signs arguably the largest defensive tackle deal. If you look at state income tax, it was not as big as Christian Wilkins, but on paper, just looking at the actual number, it is bigger. and then wants time off during training camp. Now, I don't have an issue with resting your older players. In fact, I think it's smart. I think it's smart. So I'm not saying that's a bad idea. But boy, it's a bad look when he signs a monster deal and then asks for time off. To me, there was not a lot of attention reading the crowd there. I'd love your thoughts on that.
I think
Kansas
that's
City Chiefs defensive tackle Chris Jones just wanting time off in training camp.
interesting. It's an interesting point. I think it's one of those things too where if you continue to perform at a high level like he has as one of the best D linemen in the NFL, and they're winning games and they're winning Super Bowls, it's one of those things that you could people will get past. Now, if he takes some time off in camp or whatever, and he comes out flat and they lose a game or two early, or he's not playing well, then I think you'll hear it brought up by fans. I understand what you're saying, the optics of that, because you're thinking, wow, you're making this much money. What are you going to, you gotta work for it. You got to do your job. But we have seen, I think it's pretty much become league wide. Different teams will have certain vets days for a different player or two, or we obviously well know that the main players don't really play in the preseason at all anymore. So I don't think that it's necessarily like unheard of for guys to get days off or get some rest. But like you said, asking for it when you just signed that contract could leave you open to some potential ridicule down the line.
Yeah, it makes no sense to me. Again, I have no problem with it. We're talking optics. I'll give you an example. Several years ago, I was covering a team, and it was a very bad season, a very bad season. And all the coaches got raises.
Mm.
Now, one of the things I don't like is I would assume if you hire a coach, it's so that they win. And if you don't win, you get fired. So if you have an average season, I don't know where the raises come in unless you can see maybe where it's building. Well, this team was going backwards, had been good, was going backwards, terrible season, and the coaches got raises. And I said to the head coach on camera, I said, what do you say to your fans who work in a factory making 50 grand a year who buy your tickets? What do you say to them when if they perform as poorly at their job as your coaches do, they get fired and your guys got raises?
Mm.
Well, I would wish if they had a great track record of success and they had a bad season that their coaches would be, that their companies would be nicer to them. I'm just like, oh my God, you have no clue. You are so unattached to reality. Same principle to
Sorry,
me.
loosened up my neck a little bit. My neck was
That's
bothering
right.
me.
Everybody's just happy you're feeling better. But my
Yeah.
point is, the principle is, I think Chris Jones should take time off.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's smart to give him time off. You just don't let it go public.
Right. That's fair. And again, another thing too, like, and we've seen this with different franchises in the NFL and in other sports, have subpar seasons and then raise season ticket prices. So the fans are now paying more money after watching a bad product. So, it's one of those things where it happens. But I think, like you said, it's one. If it's one of those things, if it doesn't get out, because if fans see Chris Jones getting a couple of days off in camp or extra time, they're not really going to complain because their thinking is we got to keep this dude healthy for the season. But when you ask for it or it gets out publicly, that's when the issue becomes an issue. Because if Chris Jones is getting an extra day or two off, all Andy Reid has to say is, yeah, it was my decision. And it's okay. But now that it gets out, if he's asking for it, that's where you open yourself up.
All right, last question I have is purely a Raider question. When you look at the Chiefs, they didn't do a whole lot. They go out and get a speedster at wide receiver that I think they overpicked. I don't think where they got him. I think he's a good player. I think he's a good kid, but I don't think he's anywhere of value of where they picked him. And I understand they didn't have a lot of needs, but I don't think the Chiefs are any better, but they're still the world champion. I still think they're a great team. Denver, I just read at the Spun the other day that the odds-on favorite to be the starter is Bo Nix. That's great news for the Raiders. And the Chargers lose a ton of players. I think they significantly upgraded in coaching. I thought they had a great draft, but I don't think they got better next year. There's going to be a learning curve. So, is it fair? Can I make the argument that the Raiders are the most improved team in the AFC West?
I think you can. I mean, listen, I do think that, yeah, because looking at the rosters now, looking at what these teams did, I mean, like you said, the Chiefs didn't have a lot to really have to augment. I did like the Hollywood Brown trade from the
I did too.
Cardinals. Yeah, so that was a good move, but they didn't have a lot they had to do. Denver, if they're not worse, they're not any better. They're just the same. I think I would be surprised if they're not the fourth place team in the AFC West this year. And I think when you look at the Chargers, they had some talent, even though they lost some players. And they do have the second best quarterback in the division in Justin Herbert. So I think your argument for most improved team is which team added some different pieces, maybe improve their roster versus how much are you buying into how much of a difference Jim Harbaugh is going to make in year one. Now, I do think he's going to make a difference. I think he's going to make them better. I think they're going to be a competitive team.
Yep.
So
100% agree with you.
and I think he's going to win there because he wins everywhere he goes. But I don't think it's an unfair argument to make the case that the Raiders are the most improved team in their division.
Hey, Matt, tell everybody where to find you on social media, buddy.
Sure, you can find me on X, Twitter at Matt Haladik 919, MATTHLADIK 919. And right now it's a lot of off-season talk and some Yankee baseball, but during the season there'll be a lot of NFL stuff every week. I'm tweeting about the games. I'm tweeting about what's going on. So come find me.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. See you tomorrow.